Hi everybody, welcome to today's presentation of DB Optimizer. All the lines are on mute, but there's the GoToMeeting dialog boxes. So if you have a question, you can submit it there. It may not be answered until a follow-up, but that's a good way to reach out to us and contact us. And then there's some other resources that we'll point out to you as well. So some new momentum with some of these products from the Power Studio bundle. So today we're focusing on DB Optimizer. You can get to the product page from the IDERA website, so we'll introduce some of those areas here. I have a few slides to use as a template, or at least an agenda, and we'll go through the core features of DB Optimizer. So it's a productivity tool for tuning databases and optimizing SQL. And from the IDERA website, you have the products drill down, and there's the DB Power Studio link. And so that will take you to the Power Studio homepage where you have different product drill down pages. And today we're talking about DB Optimizer. So look for some upcoming webcasts on these other product bundles. And then also some of these posted recordings to the IDERA YouTube page. So there's different resources here for you that will be helpful, and that's where some of these will be posted. So from this IDERA homepage, you can drill into the DB Optimizer summary page. So there's details in terms of platforms, and here's a summary in terms of highlights of where DB Optimizer helps and optimizes your database performance and tunes SQL and lets you build visual diagrams. And so we'll go through these different examples. And then, of course, you have documentation. There's an online wiki for all the products in the Power Studio bundle, and those are helpful resources for you as well. So we'll show you some of these areas before we wrap up today. And then we also wanted to mention we have the IDERA Live conference next month, or in 3 weeks, on September 16th. So that's a day of seminars and product demonstrations, and so different ways to dive in and take advantage of some of the solutions that IDERA offers for you. Okay, so I have the product open, and so we'll introduce the user interface. This is a very mature technology, up to a version 17. Been on the market for over 20 years, and now has stayed current with the 4 major RDBMS platforms of SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, and Sybase. So you have resources here in terms of documentation and more details on these areas. But here's just a few slides to introduce where DB Optimizer can help, and we've built some of this from the documentation. And the tools named well, where it optimizes the database, and that can be in terms of performance and finding bottlenecks and doing weight analysis, or drilling down into individual SQL. And so if you have SQL that you're interested in tuning, that could be a starting point, right? So you can dive right into the SQL tuning. If you are more interested in looking at performance, or finding where the SQL that needs tuning is, that's the database profiling area. So those are the 2 areas that we'll focus on today. And then the documentation really focuses on that as well, right? So just here on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side rather, you can see I have the SQL profiling and SQL tuning. So those are the 2 main areas that we'll look at here today. Here's an example of the profiling display. So here's a profiling collection in SQL Server. Here's a profiling collection in Oracle, or multiple in Oracle. And so that could be a starting point, right? This is where you can do a capture and collect SQL performance and transactions from your applications, and then dive into optimizing SQL. If you know the SQL that you'd like to tune, you can dive right into the visual query tuning. And then there's different rewrite capabilities, and then comparisons of the executions of those rewrites. There's the 4 major platforms that I mentioned, and so you have some different ways of connecting there, and then you can see that the optimizers stay current with the latest versions of say Oracle and SQL Server, where you see Oracle 19 and SQL Server 2019. So those are the latest versions, and the new version of the Power Studio bundles is on the way. So there's different ways of licensing the DB Optimizer for you. And so let's dive into some of the examples that we have. And first, maybe introduce the user interface. You have some flexibility here in terms of where you display these different menus, but on the left-hand side, you can see my Database Explorer and then a SQL Project Explorer. And so these are just organization tools where you'll start here with connecting, and we'll dive into the connection window or registering a server. And then the SQL Project Explorer is a utility for grouping these DB Optimizer files. And so here you can see some different examples of these. And if I just expand the drop down, you'll see these are different savable files in the DB Optimizer. And so again, that will focus on the profiling and tuning. Those are the core areas of the tool. But if you want to start with a SQL statement and execute, that's where we'll start today, and look at the execution plan. And so the explain plan exists in the different database platforms, whether it's execution plan or explain plan or show plan in Sybase, right? And then take that SQL into a tuning job. So we'll start with a SQL statement and bring it into a tuning window, or if you want to capture performance, we'll kick off a profiling session as well. And so you have different starting points. Then there's some other utilities here. There's a SQL load utility, and so you can run transactions and execute multiple iterations of SQL to generate load and see how different variations of SQL perform with higher volume or load test increase. Okay, so you have icons here from the drop down, and then you can see those tied to the main toolbar as well. So you have some flexibility in terms of how to launch some of these windows or icons. Here's the drop down window from the toolbar, and then here's the file drill down, which has a similar file new and those same options. So let's start with talking about connecting, and then the SQL Project Explorer is a way to organize these different files, and these are savable, reusable files, and then you can organize those in different ways here in the SQL Project Explorer. So the starting point would be connecting to your different databases. You can see SQL Server and Oracle environments that I'm connected to here. And so you'll start here with the register, and this will show the user interface for connecting to your different databases. So you can see the big vendors there where this tool started, and now SQL Server and Oracle are probably the higher volume users of DB Optimizer in terms of the database platforms that this is used against. But Sybase, is still there, and some critical applications are remaining on Sybase, and so this is still widely used in the Sybase environment. And then for DB2, LUW, Linux, Unix, Windows, that's the supported version. So this would be a wizard interface, choose your platform, and then this would step you through connecting, and you have different ways of grouping or creating folders in different ways. So here I've just created a SQL Server folder, I created an Oracle folder, and I have my different connections grouped that way. So pretty straightforward wizard interface here. So here for Oracle, you can see asking for your SID or your instance. Here, if I was to choose SQL Server, you can see it'll ask for your database and host. And so this is then savable, and then you have different ways of even cloning these, right? So right-click, register like would duplicate that connection, and then you can perhaps change the database. And so different ways of managing connections and duplicating those and naming those in a way that's convenient for you, so you can understand your navigation tree. Then you can explore, right? So here if I maybe minimize the drill downs here, so for SQL Server, I drill into database objects and then databases, and so I can drill into my database tree and see my objects here, and then more exploratory, right? So here, if I right-click, there's not a lot of functionality here. That falls in maybe more the day-to-day products like Rapid SQL or DB Artisan, right? So the navigation tree is similar to those products, but more just exploratory, so you can see which objects are out there. And then you have that similarity with other platforms as well. So pretty extensive navigation tree for object support, but more exploratory here. And then depending on your starting point, you may dive into an existing SQL statement. And so here, if I open up this SQL file tab, this would allow me to bring in a SQL statement. So here, maybe if I just cut and paste this SQL statement and open up just to show you how this is easily performed, I can open up a new connection or choose which database environment I'm connecting to. And then here I could just cut and paste the SQL statement and execute that. So you have the green run arrow in the top right. And so this would allow you to execute a statement, make sure you're connected properly to the database, and then perhaps look at the execution plan. And so if I right click after executing a statement, here's the explain plan. And so the lower portion of the screen would show your execution plan. And then you could double click on that and expand that view. And so for those of you that are newer to tuning, the execution plan exists in all databases in terms of seeing the path the database will take to execute that statement. And so when you're looking at the cost of statements and the expense of statements, this is important to DBAs and people that are responsible for performance tuning. So here I could expand this. If I just double click this window, you could see comparison results. You have a graphical navigation tree of the different steps for the execution plan. And so you have that for different databases. Here's a SQL Server example. And then, a way to look at this, maybe in current terms, or a simple comparison would be similar to, say, Google Maps, right? Where you can explore different paths that you can take to get from point A to B. And so that's similar to the execution plan, where the database will show you the path it will take based on rules in the database and statistics, right? And so depending on, say, how many rows are in a database, that might influence how the database executes that statement, right? So if there's 10,000 rows versus 1,000,000 rows, the database might take advantage of an execution path in a different way. And so that's what tuning and optimization is all about, right? Rewriting the statement in a way that will improve the execution plan, right? Because you could rewrite a statement and it doesn't improve the execution plan. And so that's the balance of tuning. So if you're familiar with execution plans, this should be helpful for you. But again, you have some different drill down windows here. And so depending on your perspective, you can invoke or hide this explain plan window. And so under the window drill down show view, these are different areas. If you lose a window or something hides that you didn't know how it hid, this is a way to bring it back. So just pointing that out. So the window explain plan will bring that window back if you happen to close it. Okay, so from here we could take this statement into a tuning window. And so there's different ways to do that. I could right click and then there's the tune SQL. Or you could invoke a new tuning window from the file menu. So file menu tuning job would open up a new tab. And then this is the look and feel of the SQL tuning window. So here's a new SQL tuning window where you could just cut and paste the SQL statement here. And then as we invoke these different checkboxes, it would tune or optimize your SQL and generate rewrites and then execute those and perform iterations. So you can start with the tuning window and bring a SQL statement just by right clicking, and you'll see different options there. Or if I go back to the SQL statement that we executed and we're looking at the execution plan, I can right click here and then there's the tune SQL. So just flexibility in terms of bringing statements from one window into another. You'll see that integration. And so now this opened up a tuning window with the SQL statement listed on the first row here and the top portion of the tuning statements overview. And then there's some different areas here that I'll point out before actually generating SQL rewrites. And then we'll be able to drill into the analysis tab, and these columns will populate. And so that's where you have some flexibility in terms of what you'd like to generate. So you can generate alternatives in terms of SQL rewrites. Then you can perform a detailed analysis and compare those and find winners or improved cases. And then you can increase the number of iterations to say, address caching, right? So the more iterations would be a way to smooth out any variations in terms of the initial runs of caching. So usually it's recommended to increase the iterations a couple of times, and then you have flexibility there in terms of comparisons of increased iterations and seeing perhaps where load testing can help. So we'll look at that as an example as well. Okay, so we just started by opening up a tuning or a SQL statement window, and then we brought that into a tuning window. And now you have some options here where I can check the perform detailed analysis. Here I'll maybe increase the iterations a number of times. And then here's the play button to send this statement into the tuning window, and so through the tuning algorithm. So here you have that similar green run arrow to execute a statement, and then here's the play button to bring this statement through a tuning job. So if I kick this off, now the optimizer for SQL Server will build rewrites, and then in terms of the checkboxes that I have selected here, the detail analysis will actually execute these and then populate performance comparisons. And then you can visit the analysis tab to generate visual diagrams, do comparisons, and then even generate a report or a summary report on the iterations. So there's a progress window, so that's chugging away there in the lower portion of my screen, and you can see that as well here with the show view. So once you're familiar with the user interface, you can hide the progress window, but sometimes it's helpful just to see what's being executed. And so now you can see, as I've let this run, first it generated the rewrites, and then it started executing the alternatives, and now I have comparisons here and some summary information of what was generated. And so you can see it generated 73 different cases, and then there's an index analysis on the analysis tab as well. So here's some summary information, what objects were used, levels of improvement, and then you can drill down into these individually, or I can expand these alternatives and explore these. And then, if depending on your level of tuning, you can mouse over and you'll see some summary information there. You can right click and do comparisons to see how that rewrite compares to the original statement. And so you can see at the top there, you have that original statement, same as the first line here. And then here are the different alternatives. So if I right click on any of these, you can see where the optimization engine for that platform brought in, say, a SQL optimization or a query hint. So here, right click, compare to parent, and you can do the side-by-side code analysis to see where that SQL rewrite occurred and how it performs. So you have the side-by-side comparison in terms of code comparison. And then here on the analysis tab, you have visual diagrams and then index recommendations. And so here you can see at the top you have a drop down in terms of which statement you're looking at, right? So you can choose from the list of rewrites, and so that's a similar list here. So if we maybe go back to that merge query join, you can see the visual representation. Right click, I have a detailed mode to expand the view here, and then this is a visual representation of this query, so not the execution plan diagram. But here I can actually highlight objects, indexes, tables, column level, and it will point that out within the SQL statement where that's being used. And so that's a benefit in terms of understanding SQL and how the database is executing that statement. And so you have that for any of these different alternatives. And then for the the index analysis, you can see some different color coding, and you can highlight those. Let me hide some of these windows on the lower portion of the screen just to maximize. So as you highlight one of these, you can see a summary of information here. And so so this list of first indexes here are recommended indexes, right? So they recommend implementing this index. The green indexes are actually being used by the SQL statement, and then you have indexes that were not used, and so unused indexes. So you have a variation there, and then if you are implementing or have an indexing strategy, you have the ability to generate the DDL for these alternatives. So depending on your level of experience, there's performance with indexing, and so there's some considerations to have there. But you do have the ability to generate the DDL from this analysis tab. So in terms of implementing the SQL rewrites, here you can just double click on these and then bring that into your source code. And so that would be a way to update or optimize the existing SQL. Again, if you're in vendor applications, you might have more of an indexing strategy if you're locked out of rewriting the SQL. And so that's where the profiling can be a starting point. And so what we did here was start with the SQL statement and then bring that into a tuning session. So if you know what SQL you'd like to improve or optimize, you have that as a starting point. But maybe you're not as sure of what SQL is causing the performance hit, or you perhaps are just doing regular maintenance. And so that's where the profiling of your database is a benefit and a real strength of SQL Optimizer. So we'll close out with the profiling, where this will do a collection or capture of your SQL. And so here I'll kick off a profiling session, and you'll see now a collection of SQL transactions. And so let me kick off a little activity here just to generate some spikes here. So we mentioned DB Optimizer is part of it's a standalone product, but also part of the Power Studio bundle. And so DB Artisan is a well-known tool there. And so here, if I maybe just generate some activity here within this database that I'm collecting, we'll generate some performance spikes. So I'm just in DB Artisan here executing some SQL, clicking on some performance metrics. And so that will generate a performance spike. So here you can see DB Artisan as an application that is starting to collect SQL from. And then another area within SQL Optimizer is the load testing. And so let me kick off a load test here as well to generate activity. And so again, these are different utilities that you can take advantage of within DB Optimizer. So that there's different file extensions for these, right? So you can see the profiling has the AR extension, the tuning has a .tun extension. So the load testing has a SL extension. And so here I have the ability to execute one or multiple SQL and then increase the number of executions or parallel sessions. And so I'll do that here. And then again, go back to this profiling. So this is a capture, right? You can see it's running and collecting. I have the stop icon there that would stop the collection. But we'll let this run for a little longer so you can see some of the different transactions that it's collecting. And then you have a drill down capability here. So you can see overview of the SQL statements and then the performance spikes. And so there's color coding here, breakdown that you can explore or isolate. And then you have these different tabs as well. So you have the SQL tab, the events, sessions, and procedures. So this is a great utility for finding out what's going on in the database, right? If the database is taking a performance hit, let's kick off a profiling session. Or, in terms of regular maintenance, let's just see what's going on in the database. And so you wouldn't leave this running 24/7, but it's a way to capture and collect. So if you have a certain time of day that perhaps the database slows down, that would be an area that you can explore. Or in terms of regular maintenance, right? Like we all have automobiles that we have to take care of, right? And so of course there's a problem. You lift up the hood and you have to look at the engine. Or in terms of regular checkup, right? You lift the hood and see what's going on inside of the automobile. And so that's what you can do here with a profiling session. And then you'd stop this and save this. So you can save this over time, compare this to other databases. And so here's a sandbox environment where I'm performing this in say SQL Server. And then I'll stop this and we'll drill down into this. But here, if I switch to some of my other environments in the sandbox, here's an Oracle collection, right? And so very helpful, especially if you're managing multiple platforms. To do this from a single tool is powerful, right? And you'd have to spend time configuring this for different database platforms depending on the tool you're using. And so for the 4 major vendor platforms, this has been proven technology, and depending on these different areas, this might be the critical area in that DB optimizer that you use. Maybe if you have junior developers or folks newer to tuning, they focus on the tuning SQL and testing SQL and learning SQL that way. So DBAs appreciate this profiling capability. So here I could mouse over a certain window of transactions and it will isolate those for me. Then you can drill down into those individual transactions. And then if I right click from here, this is where you'd see the integration to those 2 areas that we started with, the execution plan window or the tuning SQL, right? And so you have different navigation points within DB Optimizer, whether you're starting with a SQL statement and then bring that into the tuning window, or if you start here with profiling, drill down into an individual SQL that was collected and then bring that into a tuning window. So the tabs here are helpful. Here's just overview with the performance spikes, and then you can start filtering here. Here, if I just unclick here, you have a filter where I could say, all right, just filter and show transactions just from a certain application, certain database, certain user, right? So these are helpful drill down areas. And then you have events, sessions, and stored procedures, right? So events will group and show the color coding of the database activity, and you can sort in different ways and see what that event weight was for. Okay, so again, we're trying to bring some momentum to these products, and we're building new versions of the Power Studio bundle. And so we want to thank everybody for joining. We had a few slides here in terms of just where this product fits that might be helpful to understand. And so again, these are the areas that we focused on in terms of where the database optimizer helps. These are the different platforms it supports, and then it can be licensed in different ways where it's part of a individual product line or the bundle for developers or DBAs. And so the DBA edition would be, say, DB Artisan and Power Studio and the Change Manager product. The developer edition would be Rapid SQL and DB Power Studio and the Change Manager product. So look for future webcasts on those areas, right? So today was DB Optimizer, tuning, and database performance. We'll have upcoming webcasts on DB Artisan and Rapid SQL, and then Change Manager will probably be merged in those or have a standalone Change Manager webcast as well. So we had a different cadence for some of these in terms of how often, but probably a monthly cadence or maybe more often than that. And then some of these will be posted to the IDERA YouTube channel. And so this will be a resource for you and ways of learning about other IDERA solutions. Okay, so we'd like to thank everybody for joining. Again, you can get to some of these product pages from the products drill down on IDERA.com. So IDERA, just mouse over the products, drill down DB Power Studio, and then you'll have different resources here. And so here you can drill into the platform details, Videos will be posted here. So we're all working remotely more, and these products are really helping the remote worker. And so we're bringing some momentum here, and look for some new excitement in terms of bundles on the website and IDERA pages here, and some of the different platforms that we've expanded to. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining. Good luck with DB Optimizer, and good luck with the rest of your day. Thanks.